Okay, it looks like we're streaming live now,
All right, good. Let me hit this
right on nine
button.
o'clock.
Okay, welcome everybody. Those of you who are on our Zoom platform, and we're also restreaming this presentation to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This is Lance Luke and Martin Pea, and we're coming to you presenting our Ask the Building Expert series of masterclass webinars. And our topic today is top 10 claims against home inspectors. So this is good stuff for realtors, home sellers, home buyers, and also home inspectors. The interesting thing is that this presentation was sort of made to give to home inspectors, but we're going to share all the information and so it's covering both home inspectors as well as people who hire home inspectors and realtors and everyone else. This webinar is presented by Construction Management Inspection. We're located in Honolulu, Hawaii. We do building inspections, home inspections, construction management, expert witness, and all kinds of good stuff. So let me get to the main topic here. So before I get started, Martin and I go way back because prior to starting this presentation, I asked Martin, "Hey, when did I inspect your house?" And he and his wife and family were already living in his house in Kaneohe. So home inspectors also inspect existing houses that may not be um, for sale. So it's not only for inspection of for a seller or a buyer; it's inspection for homeowners also. So we kind of pinpointed it was around like late '80s. I'm pretty sure that I did the inspection, and that was kind of a long time ago. But hopefully, when I did the report, Martin followed the advice, and he's smart because he's still following my advice, so that's a good thing. All right, so we're gonna. I kind of narrowed it down to like the top 10, and that probably could be top 15 or top 20 items, but I'll try to cover a whole bunch of stuff in a single category, and there could be more. Um, but for the sake of time, I want to leave some time at the end for questions and answers, and hopefully I'll have good answers to your guys' good questions. So the first item is miss structural defects. So there could be structural issues on a home, in a home, that the inspector may or may not have caught. And some of those defects are in this category cracks. And the cracks could be minor in nature or it could be major. Depends on the type of crack and where it is and things like that. Um, Foundation settlement, sagging beams, and framing issues. So these kind of all are lumped together into one category called structural defects. Now, let's talk about the cracks. It could be, minor cracks like you see in the image. Um, but even if it's minor, what happens if it rains and there's strong winds like a Kona low storm? What happens is the rain blows sideways because of the strong winds and the pressure from the wind velocity, the wind is so strong, it actually forces the water into the cracks. It's sort of like You got a garden hose and you turn it on full blast and you're aiming it in the crack. Well, naturally, water's going to seep in. And what's the downside? The downside is now inside the house you're going to have water, dripping down or coming through. And if you have single wall construction, if you have drywall, now you could have mold growing inside the wall. So, you have multitude of problems that could manifest just from these minor cracks. If it's bigger cracks, especially at the foundation, that's another big red flag. So older houses, you could have sagging beams from old age or wood rot or termite damage. And then the framing issues could be, well, maybe when the house was built, the framing was kind of off. Things were not plumb, and now it's covered up by drywall, and it's hard to see unless the inspector goes up in the attic, if the attic is accessible. So there's some things that are very important for the home inspector to check, and hopefully the home inspector does a good job, but sometimes things can be missed. So number 2 is roofs. Of course, if you have a bad roof subject to leaking, now you have water going inside the house. So it could be any number of problems caused by the leak. It could be worn shingles, it could be loose flashing, improper installed flashing, or the flashing is damaged or bent, or just kind of corroded and there's nothing there, so now there's no protection. Also, you have asphalt shingles. Maybe the shingles are old. Some may have blown off the roof, especially where you have termination issues on the roof. Like if you have a chimney or plumbing vents or any kind of skylight where there's openings in the roof and it has to be sealed properly. And in any kind of roof problem that causes a leak, now you have moisture entry into the house. So it could be water dripping in the attic, it could be dripping on your ceiling, drywall, your walls and things like that. So there's telltale signs of a roof leak inside your house. If you see dark water stains, or it's obvious if you see water dripping, that's the first thing. But if you don't see water dripping, you might hear something, like a dripping noise or sound, and you should be a detective and try to figure out what's going on. Also, if you look at the wall and let's say it's white because it's painted white, and you see areas where it's dark, like staining from water, okay, then you should look into that and see what the situation is. The third item is failure to identify water intrusion or water infiltration condition, moisture damage. There's could be mold that's hidden inside the wall, rot, dampness in walls, improper drainage. Improper drainage, I'm talking about outside of the house where the land or your yard is sloped such that it slopes toward your house foundation rather than away, and sometimes it's hard to correct. The wood rot, if the framing is wood, dampness in the walls, the walls or ceilings are wet. And then I put down hidden mold here, but the home inspector that's walking around the house, if the mold is hidden, that's not something he can see, right? So if he doesn't report mold, okay, he may not be at fault. But if there's moisture in the wall and he doesn't report that and it's easy to check, then the inspector would be at fault for not noting that down or noting conditions. Now, even if there's no continuing current water damage, but there's still stains on the wall or ceiling, the inspector should still note the stains and take pictures of it, so, and report it as stains on the wall or ceiling. And if he doesn't know what it is, he could put a notation down, unable to determine the cause, but here's where it is. And he could even specify the exact location, such as from the floor to 6 inches above the wall. There's evidence of staining that could be either a current water leak or a past water leak, something like that, right? That the whole idea is to note things that are readily observable, that the inspector can see. Number 4 is electrical hazards. Sometimes they're missed. Faulty wiring or outdated electrical sub-panels, which is commonly called a load center, or your circuit breaker box. And I included a picture here of this brand, is called Federal Electric Stab Lock. Now, Federal Electric is a company that made circuit breakers, and Stab Lock is a brand, and there's been a history of problems with that brand. Also, Zinsco brand. So there's some brands that the home inspector should be aware of that are problematic, and just make a note, that there's been a history of problems with it, although maybe he doesn't see any problem during his inspection. Okay, now when I'm talking about inspecting houses, this includes a single-family house as well as condo apartment units, and it could be a duplex, or it could be a 40-story high-rise condo building with 400 units in the building. Okay, so any kind of home or house can be inspected, whether it's a condo, duplex, or single family. Okay. Some more electrical, if there's 2 wires to a circuit breaker and that particular breaker is not rated for 2 wires, there's a common term called double tapping or double lugging. I don't want to get into the specifics of each one. They're a little different, but that's been a ongoing situation where a lot of homes are wired that way, but it's still a problem. So it's not the home inspector's fault if he noticed it and writes it in his report, because it is electrical code violation. And then unsafe breakers. I have a image here of a circuit breaker that's just attached to the wall, and it's not enclosed in a containment a metal box like a circuit breaker box. So you can tell this is like a old style of doing things, but it's still wrong, because back in the 50s and 60s they still had metal boxes. So there's no reason for installing circuit breakers directly on the wall without any enclosure, because if there's ever a spark or a fire started, it could spread throughout the whole house because it's not contained in a metal box. Let's talk about plumbing. Missed plumbing deficiencies. You could have leaks underneath the sink, low water pressure. Well, what is it caused by? Is it caused by because your main shutoff is not completely in open position, so everywhere there's low water pressure, or is the water pressure low because the house is old and you have old galvanized pipes, right? So the already there's certain things that's consistent with the age of the house. Like if the house was built in the 50s or 60s, chances are there could be uh, galvanized pipe for your plumbing, and it could be you have old cast iron pipes for your drain piping. And these two types of pipes have a tendency to corrode from the inside. And a lot of old houses that have galvanized pipes, you have low water pressure, especially on the hot water side, and that's because the pipe is clogged, and so the diameter of the pipe when it's new used to be wide open, and now you have like so much corrosion, there's hardly any space for the water to go through. So if the house had sorry, I don't know, I just had this pop-up thing I gotta get rid of. Okay, corroded pipes, if the house had crawl space underneath, the inspector, if it's safe, should crawl under the house and look at the pipes, see if it's corroded, see if there's any leaks, see if there's any problems. Okay. The other thing that's included in the plumbing would be a water heater. If your water heater is old, not working, a lot of corrosion around it, the inspector should note that time for replacement, even if it's still working. Okay, if it doesn't look that good, so corrosion is subject to leaking. 6, air conditioning. We're talking about either central air or split system. The window units are kind of cheap, and inspectors really don't worry too much about those. Either they're working or not working. They could be working, but they're old, so the inspector should make a note of it, that it's old, corroded, and all that. The inspector should note down if the temperature is cold or not, right? Does the system work? Is the airflow good? If it's central air, is it balanced? If the unit is super old and unsafe, the inspector should make a note of that too. Safety hazards, very important on a home inspection. So home inspectors aren't supposed to just look at the condition of the house and give you a report. They're supposed to note safety issues, safety hazards, such as you have stairs. Is there any handrail? If there's no handrail, it should be noted. Also, faulty stairs. If the stairs are rotted out or cracked, that should be noted. Walkways around the house. If you have one section of your walkway lifting up because of soil problems or tree roots, that should be noted too. And then also I included fire risks, which would be anything electrical or gas related, those kind of things, which would be pretty obvious to the inspector. Inadequate inspection of attics and crawl spaces. So an attic is like the space between the ceiling and the roof of your house. And the crawl space, some people call attic a crawl space because sometimes there's not enough room to walk. Most times there's not enough room to walk. So you have, got to crawl around. So normally on a raised construction house, there's room between the ground and the bottom of the floor of the house, and that's called a crawl space. So you have conditions, you could have termites or other pests, wood rot leading to structural decay, structural problems. You could have insulation issues. Not every house has insulation. and then signs of moisture. Like if you look at the ceiling and there's moisture stains or water dripping, the inspector has to go look up in the attic and see where the water's coming from. A lot of times when I see that and I go and look in the attic, guess what? I see daylight. I see light. If you can see daylight coming in, guess what? Water can come in, right? Because if air or sunlight can come in, water can certainly come in. The other thing is your inspection report, you gotta document it properly. So poor documentation leads to an incomplete report. And I always tell inspectors you have to take photos of everything, right? So if you note something in the report that's a problem and you don't have a photo, it's hard to visualize, right? Or a vague description of something, you're not documenting it correctly, or inconsistent findings, so you're wishy-washy about what the condition of something is and you're not clear, or in one part of the report you state something and in another part of the report it's kind of conflicting documentation. Okay, so that's like key. So very important that the inspector does a complete and thorough inspection of the property. That's number one. Number two, very important that the inspector documents everything that is seen and described. So you cannot, no matter how good the inspector is, right? The inspector could be really good, but if that inspector doesn't document things properly, then you're left with an incomplete report that doesn't reflect the experience and expertise of the home inspector. So the two have to go hand in hand. And then number 10, miscommunication or failure to explain findings. So let's say you have a buyer and the inspector is inspecting the house for the buyer, but he doesn't clearly explain something and the buyer thinks that it's nothing major, where in fact it really is. So that's a misunderstanding there, which is pretty bad. Now, what if the buyer really knew and understood what the inspector was saying, and because of that he decided not to buy the house, but he didn't understand what the explanation was and he bought the house anyway, then later on he found out that it was a problem. So that could be a big problem for the inspector. The other thing is maybe the inspector didn't clarify his or her limitations, and he goes to the property and he tells the agent and the buyer, I'm one of the best inspectors and I'm going to inspect the house and I'm going to find everything wrong. Okay, well, that's kind of a poor expectation, because I don't see any inspector, no matter how good him or her is, they're going to find everything wrong with the house. Okay, it's almost impossible. But normally what I say is I'm going to inspect the house and I'm going to give you a good snapshot of the condition of the house as it stands today. Tomorrow things could change, and I don't have x-ray vision. I'm not Superman, so if things are hidden in the walls, I'm not going to be able to see it. And sometimes buyers and agents don't understand that. They're like, you should have caught the leaking plumbing pipe. Well, if it was hidden in the wall or ceiling, we can't tell, and it wasn't leaking at the time of the inspection, kind of thing. Okay, so that's very important things to note. Before I move on, it was kind of like a fast general summary, but I just want to clear things up in general. When home inspectors are hired, or there's actually standards of practice that the home inspector has to follow, and this is national standards. So when I first started doing home inspections in the late 80s, I was doing it before then, but I wasn't really following any standard. And then later on, there were organizations that came up with these national standards for all inspectors to follow. Okay, so in the early 80s, home inspection was kind of unheard of. It was happening on the mainland, like California, because of lawsuits, but in Hawaii, nobody was really doing it. In the 80s, there was like 5 home inspectors, and initially it started off as contractors, like buyers or realtors would find a contractor that could be their friend, and they say, oh, I got a house that I have a client that's buying a house. Are you able to, you're a contractor, you know how to build a house, are you able to come and inspect it? And they said, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. So that's how this whole thing started, where contractors were doing home inspections, and then later on you have architect, engineers, and other people who are in the construction industry who know how houses are built, started doing home inspections. And at that time, in the early 80s, realtors were kind of telling their clients, you don't need a home inspection. Why? Because home inspectors were called deal killers. Like, oh, you're going to go pick apart their house, you're going to make a list, and the buyer's going, oh, how come so much stuff is wrong? I'm not going to buy it. So I was labeled as a home inspector deal killer, right? And at first I got offended, and later on I accepted that title, and people go, oh, I heard you're a deal killer. Well, you can call me whatever you want, but if a deal killer term equates to a complete and thorough inspection, okay, I'll be the deal killer. But when I tell people I'm not killing the deal, I'm not making stuff up. The condition of the house is the one that killed the deal, not the home inspector. The home inspector is just the bearer of bad news, or it could be good news. The job of a home inspector is go in there, inspect the house, and make a list of deficiencies or problems. Okay, so that's the history. And in the late 80s through the 90s, I actually bought a home inspection franchise called Amerispec Home Inspection Service, and that was one of the top biggest franchises in America. They're also in Canada, and to this day they're still one of the top home inspection franchise companies. And I was located in Hawaii, but I used to get all their claims. So whenever any home inspector got a claim filed against that person in any of the Amerispec franchises, the franchisor would send it to me to evaluate and review. And I've seen so many come across my desk, and there's times where I said, hey, the inspector missed it, they're guilty. And then some I said, no, it's not their fault. So I'm happy that I got to do that, because I got to be aware of what was happening throughout the United States as far as the home inspection industry, and what things were bad, what things were good, how could we improve it, and things like that. So I'm almost finished. I got one more thing. Now, when home inspectors go out to inspect the property, they're not inspecting for building code. Okay, so when people think, oh, I had the house inspected, so everything is to code. No, that's not necessarily true, because no home inspector should be inspecting pursuant to the building code. That's not their job. Okay, although they should be versed and know what the building codes are in order to do a proper inspection, but they're not the building department. They're not DPP. They're not the local city and county building inspector. They're home inspectors. So, what happened when the home inspection industry first started, it was just a bunch of contractors inspecting, and now, there's various huge associations with their own standards of practice and certification. So it got to be kind of an unknown industry now, a very popular industry that's actually a job, a full-time job for some people, right? I mean, when I say some people, that's like thousands of inspectors throughout the United States. That's a full-time job. And that's like any kind of technical job, like electrician, plumber, a home inspector, right? So I just wanted to say that. Now, we've given a whole bunch of webinars on different topics. There's a whole bunch. I'm not going to go through it because there's too many to name, but it's on our website. The webinars are all recorded. What's coming up? We have interesting topics coming up next month. You can go to our website and check it out. Here's our website, askbuildingexpert.now.site. Every day we're adding to it. And there's also other websites within that website that you can check too and get information you need. We have a national expert, building expert blog too. And then, like I mentioned, our previous webinars are all recorded, and you can go and watch it anytime for free. You don't need to pay high Netflix or Disney monthly fees. Ours is free. And then we have a bunch of books too, and I'm sure some of them are free, but try to get as many as you can before the free changes to buy it on Amazon. And then we got a couple websites, buildingcode.now.site and constructionexperts.now.site. You can go see those. There are some of our websites, we're still working on them, so there may be some images that we have to put back up. And now we got to the Q&A. You got questions, we got answers. Now, this is an open forum. If you're a home inspector, you can ask questions or give comments also. Those of you who are on our social media platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you can post your questions or comments, and hopefully we can get to them today. If not, we promise to respond to you at a later date. We take pride in responding to every single question that comes up or that's posted on our social media. And if somehow we missed it, just ask us again, and we'll be happy to comply. If you don't want to post on social media, you want to talk directly or email, I have my number and my email on the screen. If you're listening and not looking, my number is 808-754-3425. And believe it or not, that's my mobile phone. And people say, you're crazy giving your mobile number out. Yeah, of course I get people calling and trying to sell me stuff, but I think I have 3 different systems on my phone to block out unwanted calls. So it detects people calling and trying to sell stuff or scam calls and all that. I don't know how marketing calls still get through, but they do. And then my email address is lanceluke@hawaiibuildingexpert.com. So we're open to help, and we don't mind helping. But right now I want to turn it over to Martin, see if there's any questions or comments from our wonderful audience on Zoom as well as on our social media platform. So Martin.
Yes, Lance. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the questions from our various audiences. But before I do that, I do want to thank you for your home inspection service, Amerispec, back in the 80s. When I bought the home that we were in, this is you did the inspection. I think it was in the mid 80s, and we're still in the home, and it's still very safe and been maintained according to your guidance. So thank you to you personally for all the years of keeping us safe in our home of almost 50 years now over here.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that you get an A plus because you followed my recommendations. That's nice.
As much as possible, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Okay, let me hit you with the first question here, and it is if a defect wasn't visible during the inspection, but later becomes a problem, how can inspectors best protect themselves?
Okay, so um, let me clarify if a defect wasn't visible. So if a defect was not visible to the inspector, like there was no defect that could be seen, okay, um, it wouldn't be necessarily the inspector's fault, right? Now, if the defect was visible but the inspector passed over it and didn't really see it, then I would say the inspector's at fault for missing that. But I'll give you an example. Okay, you have a single wall construction house and you have siding, or you have a beam, and it looks okay, right? But the beam is totally termite damaged. To the regular person, there's no damage, right? To the inspector, is there damage or not? So um, I would say the inspector should have caught it by um, kind of tapping the beam to see if it was solid or not. Okay, and I've had cases like that where I had to review, and the home inspector said, "I'm not a termite inspector, so why should I note termite damage?" And my response was, "We're not asking you to write termite damage in your report. We're asking you to write wood damage, and then you can add a disclaimer, right? And it's pretty obvious. Like in my report, when I put there's damage to the beam. Consult with a licensed pest control contractor." Okay, what does that, what does that mean? Well, it's kind of obvious that the inspector's saying it's probably termite damage. But believe it or not, home inspectors are not licensed to even use the word termite in their report or pests. So to get around that, you just say there's wood damage and hey, consult with a pest control person. We're not a licensed termite contractor, so we don't know. We don't know if it's um, termite damage or not, but we can probably say it is. Oh, is it old? We don't know. Is it new? We don't know. Is it current? We don't know, right? But what you should know as a home inspector is that there is some kind of damage. Now, to not say that there's damage, period, without saying the word termite, right? An inspector didn't do that. So there was termite damage, there was damage, but the inspector didn't note it on his report. Why? Because he didn't tap the wood and to see if there was wood damage. So in this case, the inspector was guilty, even when the insurance said according to the standards of practice, we're not required to do this or do that. Okay, so if the defect was not visible at all, it wouldn't be the inspector's fault. Let's say there's a leaky pipe in the wall, and it's dripping inside the wall, but there's no manifestation or there's no areas where you could see that it was wet or no stains or anything. So it wouldn't be the inspector's fault, right? So things come up later, and a lot of times, it's easy to blame the inspector, but it may or may not be his or her fault, depends on the situation.
Okay, thanks, Lance. Next question that we got here is, what are the most critical structural or roofing warning signs inspectors should never overlook, even if they appear minor?
Um, let's talk about structural first. Now, seasoned home inspectors, they see problems all the time, and they see structural problems like you crawl, under a house and you see maybe a loose 4x4 post, and it's not perfectly sitting on the footing block, or maybe water got rainwater eroded away part of the footing, and the inspector sees that all the time, and he doesn't. That's minor, So even if it's minor, it still should be uh, notated in the report. Also, like cracks in the stucco, I reviewed one report where there was like minor cracks in the stucco all over the house, but the inspector said it was just hairline cracks, so he didn't think to really make a big deal of it. Come to find out, the cracks were due to soil movement, unstable soil, and it became a major issue. Okay, so I would say the inspector should note down any kind of things that look out of place. Okay, even if it's minor. So when I used to teach classes to home inspectors, I tell them, even if you think it's minor, you should still write it down, okay, and put it in your report. Now, talking about roofing, warning signs would be like on older homes where the attic is accessible, and you go in and you see sagging frames or the roof sagging, and it could be due to termites, but maybe not. There was one house that I inspected that had a brand new roof, so I'm like, oh, okay. And so the buyers told me, oh, you don't have to inspect the roof because it's brand new. I have the papers here, from the seller. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'm still going to inspect it anyway. Come to find out, the brand new roofing shingles were the third layer. And so you have the original layer of shingles, then you have the second layer, and this is the third layer. And there was so much weight from the shingles that portions of the roof were sagging because the roof rafters were old style and they were spaced, pretty far apart. The other thing was that the building code doesn't allow a third layer. So that was kind of wrong already. Okay, so there's certain red flags and signs to look for. Every house is different. So it's like when a home inspector goes to a house, he can't just have a template from a previous house he inspected and use that, because every house is different. The layout's different, design is different, the condition is different, the maintenance. So even if it's a tract home and every house on the street is exactly the same, and he inspected one house down the street, and now he's inspecting another house in the same street, and it's pretty much the exact same house, he can't use the same report, because who knows, one house could be really good, well maintained, and the other house trash. So you can't really depend on that. So yeah, some things that are overlooked could turn out to be high high dollar claims. So inspectors have to, really watch out. It's not easy. Like, okay, I took classes and I got my certification. Now I can go and inspect. They have to have experience and they have to have inspected hundreds of homes before they're qualified. Being a contractor and being an inspector is two different animals, two different things. So not all contractors can be good inspectors.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Lance. Seems like
Sure.
the key is document and report everything you find or everything you see. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Next question here is, what is the most common documentation or reporting mistake that leads to claims against inspectors?
I would say that the written report on some things may not be clear or concise, written like in plain language so the buyer and agent understands it. And in some cases, the inspector does not have to list the cause of the problem, like what caused it, especially if it's not known. Okay, so let's say the house is shifting, right? And because of bad soil, the inspector may not be qualified and shouldn't say, "Oh, the cause of the house shifting is because you got bad soil." Well, how does this? How does the inspector know for sure, right? So, um, the inspector can note the effect of the cause, like the soil shifting, or you have a house in Palolo on a hill, and there's signs that the house is sliding down the hill, right? So there's certain ways the inspector can write the report, and he's noting down what he or she sees at that time, right? And it's obvious that the house has shifted, so he's documenting all that. He doesn't have to say it's shifting because you got bad soil or the house is on a hill or whatever. He should say, here's what the problem is. Now, consult with other experts, such as a structural engineer or a soil engineer. There's nothing wrong with the inspector saying, here's what the problem is, and because I'm not the expert, I'm not a soil engineer, I advise you to consult with, this type of engineer for further review or to see what other information is needed, right? So when the inspector does that, then the liability is less. If the inspector just says, here's what it is, the house is sliding down the hill, it's probably due to bad soil condition, and leave it at that. Now, because the inspector said bad soil condition and there's a problem, right? Maybe the inspector gets sued, and then the attorney is going to ask, do you have any degrees in soil engineering, or are you a licensed soil engineer? And the inspector is going to say no, no, no. And then the next question is, well, why did you write that in your report? You're not qualified to state that that's a problem, right? Similarly, if the house looks like it's not framed correctly and it's a structural issue, the inspector shouldn't go beyond acting like he's a structural engineer and saying, oh, the load is too heavy, the beam is too small, and start going into that dissertation when in fact the home inspector is not a structural engineer. So there's certain guidelines that got to be followed, and some inspectors wanna act like they know a lot of stuff in engineering, but they could dig themselves deeper in the hole by going beyond what they're qualified to do, right? And I always tell inspectors to research what the qualifications are to be a architect, structural engineer, soils engineer. And if you don't fit that thing, then be careful, of what you say, because it could come back and bite you later. So anyway, what other questions we got?
Oh, yes. Well, that's a good answer on that one too. Um, the next one here is when attics or crawl spaces are inaccessible, what is the correct way to document that so it doesn't come back as a claim?
Very easy. My answer is you make a note that uh, unable to access the attic, and then you have to say the reason why, right? You can't just say unable to inspect the crawl space and period and that's it. And we had some claims where there was a notation unable to access the attic space, and then when we asked why, the inspector said, "Well, I was too lazy that day." Right? So we want why. You can't access. You couldn't inspect. Why? Okay. Was it uh, filled with storage items, personal possessions? Was the attic space too small, too low, not enough clearance? You couldn't move around. Um, was there substantial termite damage that would render access unsafe for the inspector? You don't want to fall through the attic floor. Okay, or the house is old and had old knob and tube wiring, and you don't want to be crawling around the attic space and you bump into a live wire and get shot. Okay, so there's good reasons, and in some cases, even with the low clearance, the inspector couldn't crawl around. Okay, well, you have a flashlight, right? Set up a ladder and use your flashlight, take pictures, and see what you can see. You're not required to be crawling around if you can't, there's not enough space. Okay, but you can't be lazy. So, do what you can and document. If you can't inspect anything, and it doesn't have to be the crawl space, it could be a roof. Okay, if the roof is too steep, or let's say it rained that day and it's wet, it's not safe for the inspector to go walk around, right? But you can set up a ladder and, check out the roof from the ladder. And some inspectors today, they use drones and set their drone up. And I don't think a drone could replace a human, right? But you got to really know what to look for. So that's on a roof. Inside the house, inspectors use thermography cameras or moisture meters to test for wet areas. So there's no restriction on what tools or devices the inspector can use, and it's all to help complete a better inspection. So inspectors document stuff, and then buyers, if you know in the report that the inspector didn't inspect something, try and see if it still can be inspected. Like he couldn't check the attic because there was storage items. Okay, then talk to your agent. Can the seller remove the storage items so the inspector can go back and inspect? Because the more areas the inspector can inspect, the better. The more areas that are not inspected, how do you know what's wrong? There could be nothing wrong, but what if something serious is wrong and it didn't get inspected? Okay, so that's just some words of advice there.
Oh, very good advice. Thank you, Lance. And
Sure.
we get one more question that came in here, and let's see what it is here. How can inspectors clearly communicate serious findings to clients without causing confusion or misunderstandings later?
Documentation and how you write the report are keys. There's an art to writing a home inspection report, and without just writing a bunch of words, right? So It has to be clear, it has to make sense, and it has to not confuse the client. And it has to be written clearly, and the client has to be able to understand it. And you cannot, if it's something major, you cannot water it down. Like if you see something bad, oh, I see the windows are leaking, water's coming in, right? And you note that down, and then you just, if the buyer asks you, you can just use caulking to fix it. So in the buyer's mind, oh, it's something not that important, right? Um, so the buyer would say, well, I didn't think it was important because the home inspector didn't make a big deal of it. But then later on, upon further review, we found that every window was leaking, and the house was $1.2 million. And guess what? It was leaking for a while because when we investigated it, there was mold growing inside the wall because water was coming in, through the windows. So what the buyer thought was something simple, because the inspector didn't clearly report the findings, and now there's a $500,000 claim against the home inspector. Okay, so the takeaway is the inspectors have to document clearly what the situation is. And in my career, I've had agents tell me, can you not scare the buyers? These are first time buyers. Don't say stuff that would scare them, or write it in a report that it's a hazard and it's a problem. And I just tell them, then I think you should hire another home inspector, because I'm not willing to do that. I write my report based on the facts, and I can't change the wording or water it down. Like electrical in the past, aluminum wiring. I had an agent tell me, oh, I sold many houses that had aluminum wiring. Nothing's wrong with that. Then I had to take the buyers on the side and tell them, can you go online and write down, do a Google search and write down, your search words, problems with aluminum wiring. You're going to see so much stuff, Consumer Product Safety Commission and all that. Then later on, the next day they called me and they said, oh, thank you, because the agent was acting like there was nothing wrong, but in your report, and you told us to do the research. We're not going to buy the house now because of the wiring problem. So I said, well, aluminum wiring is still used today. It's still legal, but there's inherent problems with it. And things have to be explained. There's lawsuits against home inspectors all the time, and some of them are nuisance lawsuits, because then they're just trying to get money. And some of them are valid. The home inspector missed stuff, and he should be accountable for that. So anyway, that's my last words. Martin, do you have any other last words before we sign off?
No last words, except very important presentation. People need to really understand the value of inspections, as I've learned over these many decades. Yes.
Okay, good. This presentation is helpful. We designed it to help home inspectors, as well as real estate agents and buyers and sellers, or even homeowners that hire inspectors to kind of know what's going on and what things should be followed. So thank you, everybody, for attending today, and tune in to our future masterclass webinars, and then also go on our website and see what you want to watch, and there's valuable information that you can get for free. So on behalf of Martin and myself, Ask the Building Expert series Thank you again, and aloha mahalo. I can't find